And so, year by year, generation by generation, we would see new forms arising from the old, changing, being selected by nature herself. I have a mechanism. I wrote my ideas to my friend Joseph Hooker, and he replied, he thought there was merit in the idea, but he also noted, he said, Charles, I think you might be a bit presumptuous to try to explain to the world how all species have come to be when you have not even studied one species in detail yourself. He was right. Who would take me as an expert who had never studied anything in any detail? And so I decided I would have to study a group of organisms to know them better than anyone else, and to see if they too told me the story of evolution through natural selection. At the time, many learned men pointed out that there was one group of invertebrates that were poorly known. These were the Cirripedia, the barnacles. I had been interested in barnacles since the voyage, for when I was walking on a beach in Chile, I came upon a large gastropod shell, and at first I thought someone had shot it with shotgun, for there were small holes across the entire shell. And yet when I looked, I thought I could see something in those holes. So I took it back to the ship, and I looked at it under a glass. And lo and behold, what did I see? A 1/10 of an inch, tiny, naked barnacle, hiding in each hole. Now you see, barnacles are amazing. Barnacles are sessile organisms. They don't move. Once the larval form finds a home, it glues itself to the substrate, undergoes an amazing metamorphosis, which normally includes calcareous shells forming around the organism. And so, for example, this is a fine example of one genus, Balanus, one of the larger of the species of Balanus. And you can see multiple individuals here have settled, become sessile, and the organism is hidden inside. And when you look in, you might think it must be a mollusk of some sort, sessile, inside a calcareous shell. But when you look at the organism inside, you find jointed limbs that are strikingly similar to lobsters and crabs. It is no mollusk, it is a crustacean, hidden here. But my little stranger that I had found in Chile, I nicknamed him Mr. Arthrobalanus. That's the way I wrote about him in my notes, Mr. Arthrobalanus. Arthro for his jointed limbs, Balanus because I assumed he might be related to this most common of genera. Mr. Arthrobalanus, I later learned, was not Mr. Arthrobalanus at all. You see, most barnacles are hermaphrodites with both male and female. It turned out that Mr. Arthrobalanus was actually female. It was Mrs. Arthrobalanus after all. But then I had to ask myself, well, where is the male? And I soon discovered that what I thought were very small ticks attached to the body of Mr., now Mrs. Arthrobalanus, were in fact not ticks, but the male of the species. And he had been reduced to nothing much more than a packet of sperm. So, I was already interested in barnacles. Barnacles. Had I only known. Had I only known. Well, I began my study, and barnacles began arriving on the trains and coming to Downhouse. Barnacle descriptions that were arriving in the post. My study filled with barnacles. I became a barnacle myself, attached to one spot, doing nothing but studying barnacles. 4 volumes, 8 years of my life. But I was proud of that work. But I will tell you this, when I finished, I hated barnacles more than any man on earth. More than the crustiest sailor who had to scrape them from the hull of ships for his whole life. I was told that at one point my son George, my children are often in my study and help me with my experiments, but I was told that George visited a friend of his at that time, and his friend took him into the study of his father. And George looked around and said, well, where are his drawers and his jars? And the child said, he has no drawers and jars. And I said, well, George said, well, where does he keep his barnacles? Of course, every child's father studies barnacles.